I wrote Structural Combat, and today we're going to read some of it. Ben Saul's words. Its usage, terrorism, has since vacillated between stigmatizing various kinds of state and non-state violence, depending on the disapprover's perspective. In the 1890s, the rise of anarchist violence in Europe and other continents, seen as asocial and the enemy of all political systems, stimulated efforts to depoliticize it in extradition, evident in the resolution of the International Law Institute in 1892 and the Rome Anti-Anarchist Conference of 22 states in 1898. A few national laws in the mid-1890s in Spain, Italy, and Switzerland also criminalized terrorism to counter terrorism. Organizations sought to define terrorism from the late 1920s to the mid-1930s. The jurists of the International Association of Penal Law and its offshoot, the International Bureau of Unification of Criminal Law, in 1935, they defined terrorism as attacking internationally protected persons to create a state of terror, which impedes the government or disturbs international relations. Yet, they could not agree to depoliticize terrorism extradition, including because of liberal concerns about rising authoritarianism in the 1930s. The 1937 Convention for the Prevention and Punishment for Terrorism required states to criminalize terrorist offenses. Article 1, Section 2, defined act of terrorism as criminal acts directed against a, foreign in brackets, but directed against a state and intended or calculated to create a sense of terror in the minds of particular persons, group of persons, or the general public. Acts of terrorism was defined circularly by the reference to a state of terror, despite objections that the phrase was ambiguous and open to abuse. And those were the words of Ben Saul. Then a Landver's notes. I should mention that anarchist violence was another boogeyman term used by the capitalist class to vilify labor rights activists as dangerous people who compose an existential threat to civilization. Despite the anarchists of the era, the 1870s to 1900s being humanitarian visionaries who sought to establish a more just and gentle world for all. Pyotr Kropotkin wrote The Conquest of Bread in this era. Lucy Parsons and Albert Parsons fought for what we now know as labor rights here in the U.S. Their comrade August Spies wrote a fantastic address in 1887 before his execution, forced by a corrupt court. Abolitionist Lysander Spooner wrote The Constitution of No Authority in 1870, criticizing the U.S. Constitution for its moral illegitimacy as a document often used as a weapon against the idea of liberty. The popular anarchists of the time envisioned a world founded on self-ownership of each person, which is far more aligned with the notions of human rights than our systems built on ownership of land and the means of production. This must be mentioned because no anarchists were actually executed for terrorism in good faith under the definition of the time. It wasn't anarchists creating a feeling of unsafety within the general public. It was the capitalists who flooded newspapers with fear-mongering. The anarchists I've mentioned here, from that era, were targeted because they showed people the framework of a possible world more fair than what the robber barons lording over serfs wanted.